This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers podcast
with Tony Brueski.
The more I watch the Murdaugh trial, the more I'm just confused about the human condition. Really. I mean, especially the people that are surrounding Alex Murdaugh and supporting Alex Murdaugh. Although we don't really hear a lot of audible voices saying he's innocent. But it's more so, let's try and minimize damage, I think, because we like to live this entitled lifestyle that we've always been living. And maybe it's crashing down. Maybe can we salvage any of it? Joni Johnston is joining me, licensed psychologist, and just always good at giving insight into this stuff. What is it when someone is going through this with a family member, they're seeing the damning evidence in front of them, yet they're still there. They're still supporting it. It's a different way of thinking, I guess. Maybe it's just me, but I'm rather quick to like disown people if they do horrible things. And I can, even as a family person, or anyone, I'm easy to say, okay, you engaged in behavior that goes so far beyond what I would consider to be okay. We're done, and I'm not going to support you, and I'm not going to do anything of the sort. But you have family that still stands behind this man, it seems. What is that in people? What are they struggling to try and accept or figure out? Or is that more of a normal, healthy thing to stand behind the people that you love, even when they do horrific things?
Well, that is such a fascinating subject, I think, because I have seen that over and over and over again. And where I've seen that most often is with children with their parents. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, there's so many cases that I've been involved with where you have adult children whose father is accused of murdering the mom, for example. Mm-hmm. And the evidence just seems to be overwhelming. The person's convicted, and yet here it is 10 years later, 20 years later, and the children are saying, my dad didn't do it or my mom didn't do it. And it's mind-boggling. And I think the best explanation I've come up with for myself is that it's almost like a psychological survival strategy. It's almost like I just cannot lose this parent. I cannot lose this parent emotionally. And so I have to put these blinders on. I cannot look. Now, I don't know. We don't know what Buster's thinking behind closed doors in the privacy of his home. But I have, like I said, I have seen if he has convinced himself that his father is not guilty, and of course he hasn't been convicted. But if he's convinced him, I would not be surprised by that, because I literally have seen I've seen families torn apart because of this. So I think it's almost like a psychological survival mechanism.
What
I just cannot even go there.
What is, and just kind of on a broader spectrum, what is healthier for a human being to do? Is it to sit there and still maintain some sort of a relationship with an insanely toxic human being simply because you have shared DNA? And people will, the society, well, you only have one father, you only have one mother, whatever people will say, even if they're horrific people and they've done horrible things to you and your family. Or is it a healthier thing to be able to say, I'm done with you. Yeah, I know we share this DNA, but I'm walking away and I need to find peace in my life away from you. And it doesn't matter that, yes, you're my only parent.
Well, I don't think that those are necessarily the only two choices.
Okay.
Being either I kind of say, yes, you are my biological father, but, that's it. And, I can't be involved with you anymore, or you kind of put the blinders on and don't even go to the dark places of whether this person is guilty or not. I mean, I think that certainly relationships for the most part are based on how this person has treated you. Mm-hmm. Right? For the most part. I mean, that's kind of how we tend to operate. Now, we can certainly cut somebody off because they're mean to our sister or our brother or whatever. But when you're talking about a parent, oftentimes children make that decision based on how their parent is treating them. Mm-hmm. And so I think what is probably the most healthy thing is when children, and I'm talking about children in terms of Buster here, are able to see that parent for who they are and for what they've done. And they can still love that person. They can even have a relationship with that person if they choose. Knowing what the limits of that relationship are, what the boundaries are, and what the reality is. And I think that is the help. I think that's hard to get there. But there are people who've done that. They go visit their parent in prison, and they say, I know that my dad did this or my mom did this. I love her still. I love him still. And I want to have a relationship. This person hasn't done this to me. Mm-hmm. And so I want to do this. But I think it depends on that person. And certainly just because you're a parent does not mean that you need to be in somebody's life or you should be in somebody's life. I mean, sure. That's a decision we all have to make, certainly as adult children. Mm-hmm. Sadly, as we know, having a biological child does not mean you love that child necessarily, mm-hmm. or that you care about that child. So there are certainly situations where I think it's much better off for that child to end the relationship. But I think oftentimes that's a decision that child has to make. But I don't think it's ever healthy necessarily not to be willing to look at the evidence or the truth.
Mm-hmm. And that's what seems to be, happening in some of these cases here. With you have someone like Buster, who I would imagine, you live this entitled life. It's almost like you have the cheat codes to life. You can sit there and you can get away with things. There's probably a lot of that type of life that he enjoys that the rest of us look at and cringe at, going, God, you're so entitled. Like, how do you think this way? And the answer is simply because forever he can, or he could rather. And that really was the answer. It wasn't like, well, it was because he could, because he had all that behind him. I would imagine that if all of that is being threatened to be taken away, when that happens, do people tend to flaunt that sort of privilege more than they would otherwise, just to remind everyone of who they are, or who they at least thought they were, when it's all crumbling around them?
I don't know. I think reality sometimes, when you're in a situation where you have so much privilege, mm-hmm. and you have so much, so many people at your beck and call, and you have so much power, I think in some respects it distorts the world. And so whether the person is flaunting that power, or whether they're just so, their thinking and the way they view the world is so skewed that it's like, this is just how the way the world works. So I'm not so much flaunting it to you as I'm just exercising and going about the life the way I always have. Mm-hmm. I just deserve more than everybody else. The rules don't apply to me. I can do whatever I want to, and nothing bad will happen. I mean, if somebody's been operating under those assumptions that have been based in reality, mm-hmm. what is the incentive to change those?
Exactly. Can they ever walk back from that? Do people ever walk back from that and start participating in life the way the rest of society does? Or if this is the way that you've had it so ingrained and conditioned in you, is it something when you see people like that, they rarely ever kind of come away from that narcissistic way of living?
Well, I think that people, again, I think I mentioned this in our previous interviews. I tend to be an optimist by nature. Mm-hmm. So I'll lead with that. But I do think that people can change. And I think when you're talking about somebody who has perhaps been brought up to believe that they're special and unique and the rules don't apply to them, I think it takes a rude awakening for that to change. And it's often some kind of catastrophic event, mm-hmm. that shakes their world. This could be one of them. So we don't know how Buster's going to be 5 years down the road. Mm-hmm. But we do know he is not going to be the way he was 5 years ago, because his world has already been turned upside down. And so whether he can make some sense out of that, he can, kind of figure out that maybe the world he was living in was somewhat skewed and that his life is different and he's going to have to find a new reality. And that involves maybe treating people differently, having different ideas about the world, and it's able to do that and be successful. That's going to be up to him.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Brueski.
Joni, thank you, as always, for your insights into this case. If you have an opinion on it, we'd love to hear it. You can call our phone number 24/7 and give it to us. 888-5-KILLER, 888-554-5537 is that phone number. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you download podcasts. You don't miss any of our breaking updates and discussions on the cases that we are following for you right here. Until next time, I'm Tony Brueski. Thanks for listening.